Yeah, hello everyone, and welcome to another day. So I thought, let's pick up from where we left off the last one. So I was going to read it, but I think I'll just narrate it, so we don't have to go through that. But I'm going to be speaking from Genesis chapter 32, okay, from verse 22, and all of that. So it talks about Jacob there, and how that Jacob had sent off his family, okay, across the river to head towards Esau. It says, and while he was alone, that a man wrestled him. Okay. And while they wrestled, the man told him, "Oh, let me go. It's almost daybreak." And Jacob says, "I won't let you go unless you bless me." So he touches the socket of Jacob's hip, whether it's the right hip, the left hip, we don't know. Doesn't matter. This this man, so-called man, touches his hip, and eventually asks Jacob, "What is your name?" And he says, "Oh, my name is Jacob." And he says, "No longer will your name be Jacob. Okay, your name shall now be called Israel, because you have wrestled with God and with man, and you have prevailed." That's what he was told. It says, and he blessed him there. It says, and when the morning came, Jacob walked with a limp, at the hip where he was touched by this quote unquote God. Now, this is Genesis chapter 32, so you guys can go read it on your own. You can read the whole chapter, read from verse 22. Now, we are told this, okay, by what's written, that what's recorded, that Jacob wrestled with God and all of that. So if someone were to ask me, was it a physical, you know, activity? Was it something that happened physically, or maybe he had a vision and that was the content of the vision and all of that? Personally, myself, if I was going to answer that, I would say that he had a vision. Why am I saying that? But it doesn't even matter, okay, whether he had a vision or whether it was a physical activity. It doesn't matter, but let's just proceed. Why am I saying that? He had sent, it says at night he arose, okay, from verse 22, chapter 32, verse 22, Genesis. It says at night he arose and he sent forth his two wives and then his two concubines and his 11 sons and all his possessions. Sent them across the Jordan. So that means this happened well after they had left him alone on this side of the river. I said Jordan, sorry, the Jabbok River. On this side of the river. It happened well after they had left him. And then between that time and then the morning was when this event transpired. And then it says in the morning that he walked with a limp when he went across the river, and he continued walking with a limp. Now, it's possible that yes, it was a vision that was had, and that was what was written there, what is written there is exactly what happened to him in that vision, and he woke up and he could feel the dislocation or the dislocated hip. Yes, that happens. That's the truth. I know because I've had my own experience on that. And well, let's leave that in the past. I think I've narrated a few in the past, but that'll be like 2 years ago, videos from 2 years ago. But let's leave that. So whatever it is that happens spiritually can actually affect you, on the physical side when you're awake. That's the truth. That's on one side. Now, let's even now assume that it happened physically, okay? And then he had this altercation with this man, and he wrestled with this man, and eventually it turns out that this man is quote unquote God. This is one problem that we have as believers, is that we do not question things. You understand? All that we've been taught by the church, we just took it hook, line, and sinker. We've never sat down to ask questions on why did events transpire the way they transpired, or the things that are recorded, how they were recorded, so, or the outcome or the process and all of that. We don't do that, and that's one big problem that we have, and that's why most of us are ignorant of the truth. That's the honest truth. So what I was saying now is this: here Jacob wrestles with someone that is not flesh and blood. It is plainly written, and good thing, like I always say, we did not write it. So these things are plainly written, and these things are for our own learning. That's why they are plainly written. Jacob wrestles with someone that's not flesh and blood. It's established already. We don't have to go over that again. In the New Testament, Paul writes to the Ephesians in chapter 6, and he says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Those that we struggle against, those that we wrestle against, they are not flesh and blood. Like I said in the last video, how did Paul come to that conclusion? It is very obvious from reading the books that it is a reference to Jacob wrestling with one who is not flesh and blood. But Paul takes it further now, and he lets us know who it is that we wrestle against. Paul writes that in Ephesians chapter 6, so you can go read that from verse 12. When he says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, that's our enemies are not flesh and blood. Those whom we wrestle against, those whom we struggle against are not like us. They're not humans like us. That's what Paul is trying to say. So we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against what? Principalities and powers. That's it. Against principalities and powers. Those that we wrestle against, they are not flesh and blood. They are principalities and powers. And these are the rulers of the darkness or the ignorance of this world, right? Then he goes further and says, and against wicked spirits from the heavenly realms. Against wicked spirits from the heaven. They come from the heavenly realms to wrestle with us, right? Whether it's in our dreams or they try to orchestrate physical events that would negate our ambitions or our hopes. You understand? Whether it's one of those two, because those are the only two methods by which it can be done. Either it's through a vision, okay, or they use other humans, okay, to orchestrate events that are not going to come out favorable to us. These are the people now that we wrestle against. You understand? And the reason why I'm putting it out there, it's just to dissuade some of us from what we've been taught. You understand? To do away with the nonsense that we've been taught, which is, oh, Jacob wrestled with God. No, Jacob wrestled with a principality. He wrestled with a power. He wrestled with one who is with the rulers of the darkness of this world. He wrestled with a wicked spirit. That's the truth. I mean, people cannot, it is inconceivable to me that the church cannot sit down to think that the great God who created the universe by his word will come down in flesh to wrestle with a man whom is even generations after the first man that he made. It doesn't make any sense. And the church cannot think. Why? Because we've been fed so much rubbish and we take it. We listen to preachers and we listen to the things that they also say. Not like we don't. We do. Why? Not because we want to compare notes now. No. Or because we want to see if they are starting to think well. But unfortunately, that is not the case. So what am I trying to say anyway? Jacob wrestled, okay, with a wicked spirit. That's the truth. A spirit who's even a cheat, in that he couldn't even overpower Jacob. Okay, that he had to cheat his way out of the wrestle by dislocating his hip, limiting him in combat or in battle or in the wrestle with them, so that he could get away from him. And that's the kind of spirit now, and that's the spirit now that people, the churches now refer and say Jacob wrestled with God. You understand? It's like the whole thing, they call good evil and evil has been called good. That's just what's going on in the books now. Because when you look at Isaiah chapter 6, that is the head of the principalities and powers. Isaiah chapter 6, from verse 1, when Isaiah says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on the throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. That was Yahweh. Someone once said, and it made me laugh eventually, about the seraph who took coals from the altar and touched Isaiah's lips and say, oh, see, this has touched your lips, therefore your sin has been taken away from you. And they said, oh, Isaiah's sin could be taken away because the coal was holy. And it made me laugh. How stupid, you understand? It made me laugh when I heard that, oh, it was because the coal was holy. That's why it took away Isaiah's sins. Assuming that was true, okay, that sins could be taken away by that with coal, okay, which is not true, because we know without the shedding of blood there is no remission of sin. And what is sin? You cannot come back to God. You cannot turn away from Yahweh, okay, to the Father of Jesus, who is the Most High God, whose priest is Melchizedek. You cannot turn from Yahweh to Him without that remission of sins that was done. But that's from the book of Hebrews now, okay, that is written. So what am I trying to say? People have not understood a lot of things, and when it comes to these things, these are spiritual things. And you need to now start to, when you study the books, like I keep saying, when you listen to us, go back and study on your own. so that while you study, the Spirit will give you a better understanding of that which you're looking at, so that you don't get deceived, you don't end up making a mistake. Okay, like it's as it's common out there. Why am I saying all of this? It's just to help us understand better when Paul says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Yes, that's because it's already written Jacob did not wrestle with flesh and blood. Jacob wrestled with a principality, a power, okay? A wicked spirit. That is whom Jacob wrestled with. And Jacob called him God. He called the name of the place Peniel. He says, for my eyes have seen God, and I'm alive, and I'm not consumed. So he calls that person God. So because Jacob called that guy God, yes, everyone assumed that it's God. But there are many gods and there are many lords. That's the honest truth. Which God is he talking about? It's the God of this world. That's the truth. So let no one deceive you. When they read the books, they read, it's like they've got a tunnel vision. You understand? They cannot have a cosmopolitan approach to the word of God, and that's why they miss it. And they keep missing it all the time. So I just thought I'd put that out there because I know that I only mentioned that in passing in the last video. So that's the reason why I'm making this one. Just so that when you go and read now, your lenses are renewed. When you go back to read it, you read it now, understanding what was going on. Not reading and thinking Jacob wrestled with God. No. Jacob wrestled with a wicked spirit. That's the honest truth. Jacob did not wrestle with flesh and blood. Until today, these are the same wicked spirits that we wrestle against, that we are up against. So when Jesus says that the prince of this world is coming and he has no hold on me, you understand? He has nothing on me. Yeah, why? They will always come. But then when they come, we are prepared. This is why we need to put on the armor of God. Okay, that we may be able to withstand their evil. So what am I trying to say? See, just to help you guys understand these things better. Like I said in the last video, every single apostle, apart from the Gospels, which record the life of Jesus and his teachings, okay? Every single other book, from the book of Acts to the book of Revelation. Okay, let me exclude the book of Revelation because that details a vision that was given to John and he was to share with the world. But I'm talking about every other when people start to expound the scriptures from the book of Acts, okay, up to the book of Jude, it is each one, okay, expressing themselves based on the understanding that they have received, whether by fellowship with Christ, by walking with Him, or from their own understanding of studying the books. That is what is expressed in all of that. All of Paul's writings, they are all based on his understanding of it. And by and large, yes, they are mostly right, even though I tend to disagree with a few anyway. But that's my opinion. It doesn't matter. Now, what we do here, we share our understanding of the books as we have understood it from studying the words of Jesus, okay, and every other book, whether it's from Genesis up onto Revelation. We've not understood everything, no, but we are still learning and we are still going ahead. We are still pushing forward. And most importantly, we are practicing it. That's the most important part. So, what do? We speak to the air because, yes, we know that the spirits are present with us in that form. That's the truth. Just like the Spirit of truth is present with me as I'm speaking to you. So anyway, I just thought I'd make this short video and then just to clear that up, just so that for those of us who, because I didn't expand on what I talked about, even right now I've not even, but for those of us who came across the last video, just so that they have a better understanding of Jacob wrestling with the devil. That's the truth. And that's not God that Jacob wrestled with because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. We wrestle against principalities and powers. We do not wrestle with the Most High. Jesus says that he that gathers with me is not against me. He that doesn't gather with me is against me. That's the truth of the matter. So we cannot be wrestling against our own God or against our own people. No, we wrestle against wicked spirits. We wrestle against principalities. We wrestle against powers. And that's the same thing that Jacob experienced. It did not happen today and it's not going to stop tomorrow. That's the truth. We will always keep wrestling with the spirits. So I'll just leave it there, okay? And you guys take care and have a wonderful weekend. Yeah, ciao. Bye bye. God bless you.